Welcome to Life with Gaz. If you're new to the channel, then make sure you hit the subscribe button and ring that bell, because I have a new sea fishing video every Wednesday, and then the second Saturday of every month I'll put a freshwater video on as well. Well, hey guys, welcome to Life with Gaz. Now unfortunately I've done a mischief to my ankle. I'll show you that in a second, and it's going to stop me going out fishing at least this week, maybe even the next few weeks as well. But what I'm going to do for you guys today is I'm going to show you how I make mackerel feathers, and the reason is because I've been asked a few questions about mackerel fishing after my Whitehaven video. So I'm just going to show you the feathers that I make and what I use to make them, and I hope some of you guys find this interesting and helpful. Well guys, unfortunately I've had a bit of a do and I've done my ankle in. That's what my ankle should look like. That's what this one looks like. It's about twice the size, loads of bruising, loads of colour in it, and that's going to stop me fishing. So instead I'll do a couple of alternative fishing videos which will involve me not going out. I hope you guys enjoy them, but for now that's unfortunately all I'm going to be able to do. So let's start off with catching mackerel. Now mackerel, they're a great fish to catch, and we'll go a little bit more into that in a second, but essentially the technique that I use for catching mackerel is throw it out as far as I can to start with. If I suddenly find that fish are holding closer in or further out, then I'll try and target those areas with my cast. If not, then I'll just punch it as far out as I can and then I'll retrieve. Now as you retrieve, what I'll do is I'll let it go down to the bottom, then I'll start pulling it up, and this will give the feathers a little bit of a lifelike sort of shoaling fish scattering away sort of look. Then obviously you let it drop back down a bit, but every time you pull up, just crank the reel a few times and retrieve that line to keep that line tight all the way in. Now with mackerel, more often than not, you do find that being a shoaling fish, when one hits, then you'll sometimes get other ones as well. So when you get the first bite, just keep it tight but don't retrieve it too quick. Sometimes you'll hook even more up, although I've not managed to do that this year. Now to find mackerel, you need to look for areas where obviously the water's clear. These are sight hunting fish, and they won't sniff or find anything that way. These pelagic fish will see the bait and then chase off after it, so that's hence why a lot of the time people use feathers. Now you can use bait for these guys, but the bait really relies on the water movement to be able to work rather than the smell in total. Now fishing for mackerel is not only done obviously off the shore and off the beaches and off the piers, but from boats as well, and the technique for this is slightly different. And the technique which I use when I'm fishing off a boat is to just drop down to the bottom, then pull it up, just drop it back down, pull it up, drop it back down, giving it a few turns each time, but a much slower retrieve. And unless the fish are sounding high up in the water column, then what I'll do is I'll just do that for maybe sort of 10-15 turns. If I don't get any bites doing that, then I might come up a bit higher, but you can generally rely on a fish finder to do this. Now when it comes to mackerel fishing and using feathers, they're not the only fish which will use them. In fact, I've had a whole load of other species on these feathers over the last year. I've had pollock, I've had whiting, and I've had weaver as well. So it's not uncommon to pick up other species of fish using feathers when you're fishing. But for now what I'll do is I'll go back over to how we make these things, and hopefully you guys will find it interesting. Okay, so for building this rig, what we're going to use is some 25-pound line. I've got some curling ribbon. This stuff is very glittery, it looks like fish scales, so I always like using this. I've got some coloured hack feathers, and I've got some ockeye heads as well. The ockeye heads, by the way, are the ones which I picked up off a Whitehaven pier. There's swivels and clips, hooks and all that. Now the lighter is just for branding off the end of the knots, putting a little bobble on the end of them. And if you haven't got the ockeye heads, you can do it with beads and also a little bit of rig tubing as well. But what I'm going to do is just tie a couple up now, ready to go on the main line of the rig. Okay, now I've got everything cut to size. What I'm going to do is just stick it all together and stick the hook up through the middle, trying to keep everything relatively straight. Now this is a lot more easier to do if you've got all the fly tying gear, which I've actually lent to someone, and I don't actually have it with me at the moment. But once you get everything sort of pushed together like that. Give it a little bit of a squeeze just to tighten it up. Then get your main line just here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just create a loop just in my finger and my thumb just here, and this is going to be the loop that I use. Then I'm going to wrap around this fairly tightly, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just sort of create a nice sort of strong, very long knot, which is going to hold everything in this feather in place. Now once you've come up that hook just there and you're up at the top, all you need to do then is grab hold of it, and while you grab hold of it is you don't want that knot to spring back open. Then you end up with a little loop just here. Stick your tag end just down through that hook, hold it all together, pull this end, and Bob's your uncle. So now all I've got is I've got a nice sort of strong knot just there. You don't need to go through the eye. You can go through the eye, it doesn't make a huge amount of difference, and you've got this tag end. Now I don't like it if these knots have a chance of jumping open, so all I do is I cut that tag end off just here, and then that's where the lighter comes into play. I had to take a screw out with these scissors, so they're not the best anymore. And then once I get that lighter, all you do then is just burn the edge of that knot back in, and that blow it out, creates a little bubble, and that'll stop that knot from coming back through. Now obviously what I want the tails to come out further than the silvers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just get these two silver strands, pull the tails down out the way, and I'm going to get a pair of scissors. I'm just going to cut them just on a bit of an angle, just like that, to create like a tail shape. And then that is that feather tied in place for you, just like that. Now I'm not finished just yet, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a Hawkeye head on there, and what I'm going to do obviously is just cut the line, and then the Hawkeye head is just going to protect that knot and keep it all looking sparkling and lovely and nice. Now all you do is you just thread your line inside the Hawkeye head just here, and these are the heads which I found on Whitehaven Pier, so even though it's a bit littery and a bit of a mess, I managed to get something else out of it. And then that will just go over the top and just give it a little sort of twist and a squeeze to get it over there. Make sure you turn the knot upside down so the bobble's inside like that, and it will actually push the Hawkeye head over the top, and that creates your little Hawkeye lure just like that. Now if I'm not using Hawkeyes, if I don't have any of them, then what I will sometimes use is a bit of rig tubing, and I'll just cut a little bit of rig tubing off there, slide that down over the lure itself, and I'll use that to sort of hold that and protect that knot. Now once that goes on, obviously what happens there is that just slides over the knot, stays in place. And if you want to be nice and creative, then what I'll do is I'll get a little bead as well, thread that on the line, and if I can find my marker pen, what I then do is I'll then draw a pair of eyes on that bead, one either side, and a Sharpie is great for doing that sort of stuff with. But what I'm going to do is take that off, go back to that Hawkeye head and make a few more. So something I should mention about cutting these, actually works out a lot better for you if you just cut the stem and not hack through it like I did because I was being lazy. And when you just cut the stem, you end up obviously with the feathers coming back up rather than ending up with a blunt edge. So what I'm going to do next is just test the strength of this line with the knots on it. So what I'm going to do is not actually tie this as a knot I'm intending to use, which is why I'm not going to tie them big. But I'll just tie this as a blood loop just here. Now when you tie a blood loop, obviously what you've got is you've got a knot which sits away from the line, and as it sits away from the line it actually pulls the feathers sort of out further than they'd actually go normally. So I actually quite like this knot for doing that, but I've never really tested it in terms of line strength. So all you do, see, is you just cut that there, and that will then obviously come off of the side of your line just there. And the other way of doing this, I'm going to get another piece of line to do this with, is to actually tie it on in just a sort of standard knot with another knot around it. So all you do is where you attach your feather here, just go around your finger and that creates a little bit of a loop. Just go back through it a couple of times just like this, and then what you do is you just tie the snood line onto that little loop, and once it's done you just pull it tight and you end up with that little loop, that little knot just there. But what I'm going to do just very quickly is I'm going to actually just bring the scales out. I'm going to just focus the scales up here. I'm going to pull it up and see if there's a difference in the breaking strain between these two knots before I decide on which one I'm going to use on the rigs. So I've got on here just that first sort of single loop, not the blood loop. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull this, and what you sometimes find is that line doesn't always break on the breaking strain it says on the box. So I'm just going to pull this up, just slip there, going, and that one went at £17. Now that £17 break off just there obviously is more than enough for mackerel, so I'm not too worried about that. And just looking at where it went, so have a quick look around, and it's actually gone on that little loop knot just there. So what I'm going to do now is do the same thing, but instead of doing that one, obviously I've got the blood loop just there, and we're going to test the strength for that one. So now I've got that blood loop, and I'm just going to give that a pull and estimate where that goes. And that one actually snapped on the blood loop, and it snapped at £14. So I'm going to go for just the little loop and tying the snoods on. Okay, so now I've got my feathers made. I'm just going to put the clips at each end. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tie on this little genie clip with just a few turns on a uni knot just here, and once that's tied on, what I'll do is I'll tie the swivel up at the other end. Then what I'll do is I'll start at the top and start working down, and then I can cut this this little sort of genie clip off and actually reposition that on the line. So what I've done is I've essentially made the line, a little bit of lubricant there, I've essentially made the line a little bit longer than I actually need it to be to take all of these feathers. But just like with all of my knots, what I'll do is I'll just cut that tag end off, and then I'll just burn it out with a little bit of heat off of a lighter, just like that. And for the other end, what I'm going to do is just tie a swivel on. Now what I put a swivel on is just obvious reasons. In case the rig starts twisting, it won't obviously twist up my main line, or it won't twist up the rig and tangle the rig itself. So just sort of essentially just good practice really just to do. And I tend to try and have a swivel at one end of my rigs, usually the end that attaches to the main line, because I use a genie clip up on the top, and that genie clip goes to a swivel and then obviously carries on down to the main rig. So it makes my life a lot easier just to have a swivel up there when I'm using these. Although, be it on some of my other rigs, what I'll do is I'll actually have a genie clip at both ends, and the reason for that is to do with how these rigs work. But now I'm up at the top, what I'll do is I'll start with the very top hook, and all I'm going to do is just a quick little couple of loops around my finger, just like that. Then I'm just going to go back through itself just here. I'm not going to pull it really tight, I'm just going to sort of position that quite high up the rig body itself, and then with those with that little loop that I've got just there, what I'm then going to do is tie the first feather on. So all I do essentially is another uni knot just like this. I'll pull that one in. They don't need to be sort of too long going away from the main line. Mackerel are quite instinctive when they go and hunt, so what I'll do is I'll actually chase stuff which is quite close to your main line and your weight without really thinking about it. They sort of grab first, and then after they've grabbed it, worry about being hooked or not.
So then what I'll do, obviously, just thread back through just as a very simple, very standard uni knot just here. And as I thread all that back through, pull it all down tight, then what I'll end up with is that first knot just on the line, second knot tightens up just there, give it all that little bit of lubricant, and then that is the first one done. So I'll just cut that tag end off just like this, and I'll just burn that little tag end back in just as I do with any of my other knots. But what you do need to make sure of when you do it is that obviously you don't melt that knot just there. We've got two lines joining each other, so obviously just got to be very careful and just create that tiny little bubble. Don't know if you can quite see that just there, and if the knot pulls, that bubble will just stop it chasing itself back through. So then what I'll do is I'll just measure down. So essentially what I'm going to do is just hold that feather there and then go a bit further below it, and obviously the more gap you've got, the less likely you are of actually tangling up. So I'm just going to carry on down the rig and put the rest of these feathers together, and then it is pretty much a done deal on a finished rig. So I'll just do this quickly and then I'll come back and show you guys what it looks like as a finished article. Well guys, there you have it. There's the finished rig just there. Beautiful set of feathers. With this ankle, unfortunately, it looks like I'm going to be waiting until next year to take out and use. But I do hope you guys have enjoyed this. As soon as my ankle's better, I'm going to get out fishing again. But in the meantime, I'm going to be putting together some other videos, maybe a bit similar to this one, maybe some cooking ones as well. But for now, if you've liked it, make sure you hit the subscribe button down here. Check out my latest fishing video over there, and my tackle tips and fishing playlist up top.